Hello and welcome to Simplify and Expedite your migration to AWS with the Application Migration Service. I'm Milash Mudley, a solution architect at AWS. Today, we'll cover some of the business reasons for moving to the cloud, some of the benefits of migrating to the AWS cloud, and common challenges that we often see. We'll talk a bit about what lift and shift migration is and why it's important in your migration journey. I'll also introduce you to a brand new service for lift and shift migration that was just launched in April, the AWS Application Migration Service, or MGN, and we'll talk about some success stories, and finally, I'll share some information on how you can get started. There are many different drivers for customers like yourselves who are initiating their journey to AWS, and they are driven by compelling events such as a cost objective, target dates to exit and consolidate data centers, or end-of-life hardware and software. But the conversation is changing. Boards of directors expect more than just cost savings and efficiencies, even though customers are achieving 20 to 50% savings in AWS versus on-premises costs. They want to be able to move faster as businesses and transform customer experiences. They want to deliver digital transformations and modernize their businesses, and they want to reinvest cost savings to drive new innovations and business models. For customers seeking to migrate to the AWS at scale, the primary drivers for cloud adoption are quickly changing. TCO reduction for moving to the cloud is now assumed, and the majority of AWS MGN customers are here to discuss data center consolidation and cost reduction. So the conversation is no longer why move to the cloud, it's help me move to the cloud quickly. Across hundreds and thousands of customers, we see a repeated pattern of economic payback to these migrations. A recent IDC report captures some of them, such as productivity boosts, reduced infrastructure costs, and less downtime. As you can see, the cloud does not just address cost savings. Moving to AWS provides strong business value, like better productivity, increased operational resilience, and true business agility. This is why cloud value needs to be considered with a larger lens than just the infrastructure savings alone. Operational resilience, for example, has technical underpinnings and a direct financial impact. Migration drives real business outcomes, delivering value for your company. It's imperative that you define metrics to measure these categories upfront whilst developing the business case. From there, assign responsibility to measure and report on the metrics throughout the migration project. Here are some real customer outcomes achieved. GE realized a 52% reduction in TCO. Vizia and Bustle both say they reduced their operational staff by 50%. Intuit does deployments in 1/5 of the time. So what business metrics would you establish for your migration projects? Companies that are successful in their migration usually start to do a deep analysis on potential savings, but we recommend you go even deeper than that and look into the overall impact of your migration on your business. Because companies that do make tangible headway into optimizing their cloud usage. Okay. Although there are many compelling reasons customers want to move to the cloud, there are a few common challenges we see among customers making the migration journey. The good news is we can help you address and overcome all these challenges in order to achieve positive business outcomes. As we've worked with our customers on migrating their applications and data to AWS, we've found that there are 8 challenges that most businesses need to account in for their planning and preparation stages. Many enterprises have workloads on different types of infrastructure and different operating system types and versions. There can be physical servers and virtual machines running on different hypervisors, cloud-based environments, other clouds, and even different types of Windows servers and versions, as well as Linux servers and versions and distributions. All those servers could be running different types of applications, including off-the-shelf, homegrown, custom, or legacy ones that were built many years ago, and no one really knows how to deal with them anymore. For example, Oracle workloads, SQL servers, and SAP workloads are complicated workloads to manage and migrate. Busy workloads, not only are the workloads complex, but they also tend to be busy ones that are continuously updated. You will want to make sure that you are not going to leave any data behind or lose data during your migration or as a result of long downtime during cutover. When replicating servers across dissimilar infrastructure, such as from on-premises or other clouds into AWS, machine conversions are required to enable the replicated machines to continue to run natively within AWS. This includes modification to hypervisors, drivers, and other variations. Without proper conversion, such transitions between physical machines, hypervisor variations, or different clouds will result in a non-bootable target machine. The migration process typically requires specialized cloud development skills or significant IT resources to successfully implement complex changes. The goal for any customer is to minimize the cutover window as much as possible and avoid any kind of performance disruptions to their applications and the business. This, of course, is a nearly universal constraint, and we will always work with you to find an efficient way forward. This is a just quick overview of some of the tools and services available for migrating through AWS. We think about migrations as having three phases: an assess, mobilize, and migrate. In the assessment phase, we have worked to make it easy to assess more quickly and make informed decisions. Assessments can be done in days and weeks. Mobilize is the getting ready phase. The key to mobilize is to start, learn, and repeat. Then you can accelerate your application migration at scale. We'll take a closer look at our new service, the AWS Application Migration Service, which is based on our proven Cloud Endure migration technology, and it fits into both the mobilize and migrate phases. AWS Migration Service, or AWS MGN, is our newest tool for simplifying lift and shift migration. Let's talk about what lift and shift is and why we recommend this approach. It's a fast, cost-effective approach with very minimal disruption because no changes to the applications, business processes, monitoring, or management interfaces are necessary. And AWS MGN automates the entire process. Once you have quickly lifted and shifted your applications into AWS, it is much easier and faster to then use AWS services to modernize your applications. We'll look at the lift and shift process as having two phases. Phase one is to lift and shift over to the AWS cloud, so you can start taking advantage of cost savings, agility, resilience, and all the other benefits of the cloud. In phase two, you can modernize your applications, and it's easier to re-platform and refactor applications as needed once they are already in the cloud. AWS Application Migration Service is a highly automated lift and shift solution that simplifies, expedites, and reduces the cost of migrating applications to AWS. You can use it to migrate from on-premises environments to AWS, across AWS regions, and from public or private clouds to AWS with minimal business disruption. Using continuous block-level replication and highly automated conversion and orchestration, AWS MGN helps to accelerate the migration process, minimize the cutover window, and decrease the potential for human error. Designed to perform large-scale lift and shift migration with minimal performance impact, AWS MGN enables on-time, on-budget migrations with migrated servers running natively in AWS. It is an AWS service that is managed through the AWS Management Console, enabling seamless integration with other AWS services such as AWS CloudTrail, Amazon CloudWatch, and AWS Identity and Access Management. Use Application Migration Service to migrate physical, virtual, or cloud servers to AWS without compatibility issues, performance disruption, or long cutover windows. AWS MGN is designed for rapid, large-scale migrations with a very simple process that enables you to quickly begin replicating your source environment to AWS. You can migrate applications and databases from any source infrastructure that runs a supported operating system. This includes common databases such as Oracle and SQL Server, mission-critical applications such as SAP, and homegrown applications. MGN supports most common Windows and Linux operating systems and continuously replicates their data at the block level. Well, this means that all of the data from the source servers is replicated to your AWS account, including the machine state, operating system configuration, applications, databases, and files. Your workloads are kept up to date down to the second. When you're ready to perform a cutover, there is no playing catch-up or having to replicate most recent data and wait for the last snapshot to arrive because there are no snapshots. Once you've planned your cutover window arrives, AWS Migration Service will quickly convert and launches your service on AWS. This is typically in minutes. MGN uses a secure replication mechanism for your environments. Your data's journey from the source service to your target AWS account is secure, both in transit and at rest. Data is replicated using TLS 1.3 AES 256-bit encryption in transit. In addition, you can use your own private connectivity, such as a VPN or AWS Direct Connect, to replicate your data privately on top of the encryption. You can leverage secure EBS encryption for the copy of your replicated data, as well as for your launch target instances, and manage the encryption using AWS KMS managed keys or customer managed keys. MGN uses the same process to migrate all your applications, as long as your operating system version is supported. This means that a minimal skill set is required to operate the service and no specialized skills are required for Windows operating systems versus Linux operating systems or specific databases and different types of source infrastructure, whether they be VMware, physical, or other hypervisors. MGN does the heavy lifting behind the scenes. Your engineers will simply need to deploy a lightweight agent on your source servers to enable continuous data replication to begin. After the initial sync of your source servers is complete, continuous replication keeps your servers up to date on AWS. You can then conduct non-disruptive tests prior to cutover to avoid surprises during your actual cutover window. You can conduct a virtually unlimited number of tests. MGN has a rich set of fully documented APIs that you can use to plug into migration factories or cloud centers of excellence for additional automation. This includes post-launch scripts that you can launch to remove applications, install new applications, and automatically make other system modifications during migration tests or cutover. Using MGN for lift and shift migration enables you to quickly benefit from the cost savings, productivity, resilience, and agility of the AWS cloud. After your applications are running on AWS, you can choose to modernize your applications by leveraging additional AWS services and capabilities. This lifecycle diagram illustrates how Application Migration Service helps you easily move servers to AWS with minimal business disruption. Once you have identified the servers you want to migrate, you can deploy the AWS replication agent on your source servers without requiring a reboot and without impacting performance in any noticeable way. This initiates continuous data replication into a low-cost staging area in your AWS account and in your preferred AWS region. You can manage your entire migration from the Application Migration Service console and use it to configure replication and launch settings. When you are ready to test or cut over, with a click of a button, AWS Migration Service automatically converts servers into AWS format so they boot and run natively on AWS. This process typically just takes minutes regardless of server size. After you move applications to the cloud, you can quickly gain the benefits of the cloud and easily modernize applications without investing in costly hardware upgrades. Let's dive in a bit deeper using this architecture diagram. On the left is a source environment, which can be composed of different types of applications or databases. Implementation begins by installing the AWS replication agent on your source service. This does not require a reboot, nor does it impact system performance in any noticeable way. Once you have installed the agents, you can view and define replication settings for your servers in the AWS Application Migration Service console. AWS MGN uses your settings to create and manage a staging area subnet in your selected AWS region. The staging area subnet includes lightweight Amazon EC2 instances that act as replication servers and low-cost staging Amazon EBS volumes. Each source disk is mapped to a low-cost EBS volume in the staging area subnet. The replication servers receive data from the agent running on your source servers and write this data to staging EBS volumes. One replication server can handle multiple source servers replicating concurrently. Your replicated data is compressed and encrypted in transit and can be encrypted at rest using EBS encryption. You can also control the data replication path using private connectivity, such as AWS Direct Connect or a VPN. And AWS MGN keeps your source servers up to date using continuous, asynchronous, block-level data replication. This enables replication of any application that runs on a supported x86-based Windows or Linux OS. AWS MGN uses your defined launch settings to launch instances when you conduct non-disruptive tests or perform a cutover. Your launch settings determine where your instances are launched and how they will be provisioned. When you launch test or cutover instances, AWS MGN automatically converts your source servers to boot and run natively on AWS. This conversion process is typically in minutes, irrespective of the size of server, and is executed on all your selected servers in parallel. After confirming that your launched instances are operating properly on AWS, you can decommission your source servers, and you can then choose to modernize your application by leveraging additional AWS services and capabilities. AWS MGN supports migration to AWS from on-premises environments, including physical and virtual infrastructure, private clouds and public clouds, migration from different AWS accounts and regions, or availability zones is also supported. You can replicate all applications running on supported operating systems, including legacy applications and complex databases from any infrastructure into AWS. Unlike application-specific migration solutions, AWS MGN supports all workloads, including databases, legacy applications, or homegrown applications. It supports all common Windows and Linux versions and distributions, supports migrating from physical data centers, VMware and Hyper-V, and public clouds, including Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform, OpenStack, Oracle Cloud, CloudStack, and IBM Cloud. You can also migrate from one region of AWS to another or from VMware Cloud on AWS. We're now going to go into a short demo, and in this demo, I'm going to migrate an Amazon EC2 instance from the AWS North California to the Oregon region. So I'm now in the AWS console, and I'm going to change regions to the Oregon region. And this is because this is where we have the application migration service running and where I'm going to replicate to. So I'll quickly change regions. And then I'll select the AWS Application Migration Service. And as you can see here, I've already installed an agent on my source server. I've started the replication process, so I've completed the replication settings and launch settings. I've additionally done a test migration as well. And you can see that by the next actions here saying that launch cutover instance. I can look at the life cycle of migration, and it can highlight the previous tasks that were completed of stages. I also have an important section here around the data replication state. And as you can see that here it states as healthy. This means that my source server is replicating to my staging area, and there is no lag. At this point, I can launch a cutover instance, but before I do that, I'm going to make a small change to my source environment. To do that, I'm going to switch regions to North California for my source server. I'm going to connect to my source server, and I'm going to create a very simple file. And this is going to show up once we've migrated to the Oregon region. So I'm just going to quickly connect to my instance. And create a very simple file. And here's my file created. I'm now going to log out from my source server, and I'm going to change back to the Oregon region to launch my cutover instance. So we're now back in the Oregon region. I now go into the Application Migration Service console. I select my machine, my source server that I would like to cut over. Validated that my data replication is all in sync and healthy, and I can go ahead and click on Launch Cutover Instance. And this will go ahead, and the Application Migration Service will now go ahead and launch that instance in the Oregon region. So I'll click on Launch. And whilst that's going in progress, I'm going to take you through some of the the configuration parameters and settings that you can use to configure the service. So the replication settings are configured using the replication settings tab. And within this settings area, you can configure the staging area subnet on where you want the replication service to launch. You can also adjust the replication server instance type as well, from the default T to small. You can enable EBS encryption. You can also choose a different type of EBS volume, for example, using SSD disk. And if you are going to use a private connection, such as AWS Direct Connect or VPN or VPC peering, if you are going from AWS region to region, you can configure this here by clicking on Edit and changing the settings. Now, when it comes to actually launching the instance, you go into the launch settings, and within the launch settings window, you now have multiple options, including including whether you want to copy the private IP, how you want the instance to be launched. You define the instance type and security groups, IAM roles, and the associated subnet and VPC you would want it to deploy to. This in turn will create a EC2 launch template that you would then use to use for subsequent migrations. And you can monitor the job status by clicking on the job details. And within the job details section, this will detail the steps the application migration service is processing at the moment. And this process typically takes a couple of minutes, regardless of the server size. So I'm back in the AWS console, and the migration from AWS region Northern California to Oregon is completed. And I can see that by the status under next actions and the status marked as launched. So I can now click on the job ID to look at further details, and that within this job log, it will give me a breakdown of all the tasks that were completed, as well as the elapsed time for the migration. And now I'm going to switch to the EC2 console to connect to my migrated instance. So as you can see now, I have two instances running. One is the Application Migration Service replication server that's used for the staging, area, as well as my server that we created in the North California region. So I can now connect to it. So I'm now going to connect to the instance we've just cut over, and to verify the file that we created on the source environment has been replicated successfully. So this is a post cutover test. So now change directory, and I'm going to do a list. And the file we created called demo test on the source server, as you can see, that's been replicated as well. And I can view that just to validate it. And here's a bit of output we recorded to the file on the source server. From this point, I'm satisfied that the cutover was successful. And now I can go back into the Application Migration Service console to finalize the cutover. So we're back in the Application Migration Service console, and to finalize the cutover, all we do is click on Finalize Cutover. And what this will do now is this will go ahead and terminate all the resources that were in the staging area. So it will go ahead and terminate the replication servers and its associated EBS volumes that were used for that staging part. And this ensures that you're no longer incurring cost for the staging area. This will also go ahead and stop the replication. From this point onwards, you are now you would in a real migration scenario, you would go ahead and start your decommissioning process. I'm now going to switch back to the presentation. So we recommend the following guidelines for a successful migration. Begin by identifying the source servers you will migrate. Group these servers into waves and set a cutover date for each wave. Setting your cutover dates early improves resource allocation and project continuity. Install the AWS replication agent only on the source servers that are involved in the current wave to avoid overloading your network bandwidth. Confirm that data replication has reached healthy status and servers are marked ready for testing before you launch test instances. Plan to launch tests 1 to 2 weeks before your scheduled cutover date. This will leave you plenty of time to address any potential issues that may come up. Perform cutover after you have tested all your source servers, verify that data replication has reached healthy status and servers are marked ready for cutover and are not experiencing any lag. This will shorten your cutover window and minimize cutover downtime. AWS MGN is the primary migration service recommended for lift and shift migrations to AWS. If you're using Cloud Endure Migration or Server Migration Service, we encourage you to switch to AWS MGN. So what are the main differences between AWS MGN and Cloud Endure Migration? So AWS MGN was built on Cloud Endure Migration's proven technology. It provides similar capabilities as Cloud Endure Migration, but is available on the AWS Management Console. This enables seamless integration with other AWS services, such as AWS CloudTrail and AWS Identity and Access Management. Currently, AWS MGN does not support all of the AWS regions or operating systems that are supported by Cloud Endure Migration. If your preferred AWS region or operating system is not currently supported, consider using Cloud Endure Migration. The main difference between AWS MGN and SMS is that AWS MGN utilizes continuous block-level replication and short cutover windows measured in minutes, whilst AWS SMS utilizes incremental snapshot-based replication and cutover windows measured in hours. Currently, AWS MGN does not support agentless replication, whilst AWS SMS does. If you cannot or do not want to install an agent on your service, consider using AWS Server Migration Service. Let's talk about some customer examples. As I mentioned earlier, Application Migration Service is based on Cloud Endure migration technology. While these customers use Cloud Endure migration, their stories of how they use the service and what they've achieved can apply to Application Migration Service customers as well. Inmarsat, a British satellite telecommunications company offering global mobile services, is a great example of a customer with a strategy to lift and shift workloads first and then re-platform. Their overall objective was to stop investing in high-risk, inflexible infrastructure that quickly becomes obsolete. So they knew they wanted to migrate to AWS. The only question was how. They understood that their ability to re-platform on their legacy estate was limited. They also wanted to migrate quickly. That's why they decided on a two-phase migration strategy. As their director of cloud and infrastructure operations said, if we start re-platforming, it could have taken years. Our lift and shift strategy using AWS Application Migration Service allowed us to move 65% of our IT infrastructure in 6 months. And that captures the benefit of lift and shift perfectly. Through lift and shift, they gain more elasticity, compute, storage, and support capabilities that made it easier to re-platform. They were able to bring more than 1,500 workloads to AWS, such as SharePoint sites, Java web applications, SQL servers, custom software, and legacy applications in a very short time frame. DB Systel UK is an IT organization that supports critical systems used by Deutsche Bahn Group to provide transportation and logistics services across Europe. It is also an AWS Advanced Consulting partner and provides managed services externally. They needed to exit their data center quickly, and a lift and shift approach enabled accelerated migration of 400 physical and VMware-based servers. They've moved write-intensive Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle databases and business-critical legacy applications running on Microsoft Windows, Red Hat, and CentOS. And the data center exit was completed a month ahead of schedule without business disruption. The Defense Logistics Agency of the US government successfully migrated 5 applications to AWS GovCloud under the Procurement Integrated Enterprise Environment Hosting Support contract with the help of one of our APN consulting partners in the Public Sector Partner Program. This included more than 70 external interfaces, over 200 VMs, and about 300 terabytes of data. They finished 6 weeks ahead of schedule. The results were improved security, infrastructure stability, and application performance. AWS Application Migration Service is free for 90 days. You will incur charges for any AWS infrastructure that is provisioned during migration and after cutover, such as Amazon EC2 instances and EBS volumes. You can start by migrating one server, which is an easy, low-risk way to try out the cloud, learn about the migration process, and achieve a quick win. Visit the AWS MGN product page for further details. There are special programs available to AWS customers and partners. So if you are planning a significant or large-scale migration, please do get in touch with your AWS partner or your AWS sales and solution architects or professional services team to see if you qualify for additional benefits. And finally, before we move on to the Q&A, I would just like to leave you with a couple links and resources that will be able to help you dive deeper into the AWS migration service, as well as free online digital training. We'll now move into the Q&A session, and thank you for your time.